Imagine that feeling, just soaring through the open sky, total freedom. It's something a lot of people dream about. But what does it really take to get there? To earn your wings, become a private pilot. That's what we're diving into today. We've got this comprehensive ground school manual right here, basically the rule book for the private pilot certificate, our mission. Cut through the technical stuff, pull out the key knowledge, and give you a shortcut to understanding what flying is truly all about.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it, how much structured knowledge goes into something that maybe looks, I don't know, simple from the outside. We wanted to break down not just the what, but the why it matters. For anyone thinking about flying, sure, but also just for understanding how complex systems work, how they're managed.
Okay, let's get into it then. Someone's dreaming of flying. Where do they even start? What are the absolute rock bottom requirements for that certificate?
Well, first off, eligibility. You need to be 17, minimum. And crucially, you have to be able to read, speak, and write English. That's fundamental for communication. Beyond that, it's about the experience, aeronautical experience. It's all laid out in the regulations. Section 61.109 specifically, you're looking at a baseline of 40 hours total flight time.
40 hours. Okay, that sounds like a real commitment. How does that break down? Is it just 40 hours of flying around?
Oh, no, not at all. It's very structured. Of those 20 hours have to be flight training with an authorized instructor. And within that, there are specific things you must do, like 3 hours of cross-country flight training. That teaches you navigation. Then 3 hours of night flight, which is, well, it's a whole different world flying at night. Really makes you rely on your instruments. That night training has its own requirements, too. A cross-country flight over 100 nautical miles and 10 takeoffs and landings to a full stop, practicing those night patterns. Plus 3 hours just flying by instruments, simulating bad weather, basically. And then right near the end, 3 hours prepping specifically for the practical test, the check ride. That has to be within the last 2 months before the test.
Okay, structured indeed. But here's what always grabs me, the solo part. Flying completely alone, what does that involve?
Right, the solo flying. That's where it really clicks for a lot of people.
Yeah.
You need 10 hours total solo time in a single-engine plane.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes 5 hours of solo cross-country time, navigating on your own. And there's one big specific solo cross-country flight required. It's got to be at least 150 nautical miles total distance. You have to make full stop landings at 3 different points, 3 different airports, and one leg of that flight, one segment between 2 stops, needs to be a straight line distance of over 50 nautical miles. It's a real test of planning, navigation, decision-making, all on your own.
Oh, and you also need 3 solo takeoffs and landings at an airport with an operating control tower, talking to ATC by yourself.
Wow. So yeah, it's definitely not just about logging hours. It's about building these very specific skills and experiences, proving you can handle it alone. All right, fast forward. You've done all that, passed the test, earned the certificate, congratulations. But it doesn't stop there, does it? How do you stay legal, stay current to fly? Absolutely not. Flying privileges come with ongoing responsibilities. To act as pilot in command of PIC, especially with passengers, you need to stay current. That means within the preceding 90 days, you must have done 3 takeoffs and 3 landings in the same category, class, and type of aircraft you plan to fly.
Okay, 3 in 90 days. Seems reasonable.
Yeah, but there's a bit more. If you're flying passengers at night, that's defined as 1 hour after sunset to 1 hour before sunrise. Those 3 takeoffs and landings, they must have been to a full stop.
Oh.
Also within the last 90 days and during that night period.
Yeah, full stop at night, more demanding.
Exactly. And for tailwheel airplanes, it's always full stop landings, day or night, for currency. Beyond that, every 24 calendar months, there's the flight review. Think of it like a checkup. At least 1 hour of ground instruction and 1 hour of flight instruction with a CFI. Keeps your skills sharp, reviews regulations.
And the pilot's health. The medical certificate, how does that fit in long term?
Crucial. You have to hold a valid medical certificate. There are different classes, first, second, third. For most private pilots, a third class is what's needed. The duration depends on your age. If you're under 40, it's good for 60 calendar months, so 5 years. If you're 40 or over, it's 24 calendar months, 2 years.
Okay. But I've heard about basic med too. What's that about? Is it an easier option?
It's definitely an alternative, yeah. Basic Med lets pilots fly certain aircraft without holding a traditional FAA medical certificate. It came about a few years ago. There are requirements, of course. You need a valid U.S. driver's license. You must have held an FAA medical at some point after July 14, 2006. You have to complete an online Basic Med medical education course every couple of years and get a physical exam from a state licensed physician every 48 months using a specific checklist.
So it simplifies things for some pilots, but are there limitations?
There are limitations, yes. important ones. With basic mid, you can't fly aircraft authorized to carry more than 7 people total, or ones that weigh over 12,500 pounds. You can't carry more than 6 passengers. And your operations are limited within the U.S., Mexico, Bahamas, below 18,000 feet MSL, and under 250 knots indicated airspeed. And a big one, you cannot fly for compensation or hire under basic med. It's really designed for personal, recreational flying.
Got it. So a great option for many, but not for every type of flying. What if you want to fly something a bit fancier, say retractable gear or a really powerful engine?
Good question. That requires additional training and what are called endorsements in your logbook from an instructor. For an airplane with retractable landing gear, flaps, and a controllable pitch propeller, you need a complex endorsement. Managing those systems takes specific know-how. For an airplane with an engine over 200 horsepower, you need a high-performance endorsement. Handling that extra power safely requires training. And if you want to fly high, in planes with a service ceiling or max operating altitude above 25,000 feet MSL, you need a high-altitude endorsement. That involves understanding things like oxygen requirements and pressurization.
Okay, so specialized planes need specialized sign-offs. Makes sense. Now, shifting from the pilot to the plane itself, what about the aircraft's paperwork? What does it need to have on board to be legal?
Right, the plane needs its own set of documents. Pilots often use the acronym AERO to remember them. A is for Airworthiness Certificate. This usually stays visible in the cockpit, shows the plane met its original design standards. R is for Registration Certificate, like a car's registration, shows who owns it. It expires, so you have to keep it current. The second R is for Radio Operator License, but that's only required if you're flying internationally. O is for Operating Limitations. This could be the official Aircraft Flight Manual, AFM, or specific placards, POH, basically, the rulebook for that specific airplane. And W is for weight and balance data, super critical for safety. You need the current empty weight and center of gravity info to make sure you're loading the plane correctly for every flight.
Okay, that's handy. And beyond the paperwork, how do you ensure the plane is actually airworthy, mechanically sound? What about inspections?
Maintenance is huge. There's another acronym pilots use sometimes, AD one hates, but the core inspections are key. Every aircraft needs an annual inspection. That's once every 12 calendar months. Very thorough. If the aircraft is used for hire, like flight instruction or rentals, it also needs a 100-hour inspection, basically a mini annual every 100 hours of flight time. Then you have things like airworthiness directives, ADs. These are like safety recalls for planes. They must be complied with. VOR checks every 30 days if you're flying under instrument flight rules. Altimeter and transponder checks every 24 months. And the ELT, the Emergency Locator Transmitter, that needs inspection every 12 months, and the battery has specific replacement times. It's all about preventative maintenance and ensuring safety systems work.
Okay, lots of checks. But what if something is broken? You do your pre-flight check and find, a landing light is out. Can you still fly?
Inoperative equipment, that's a common question. It depends. First, is the equipment required by the regulations for the type of flight you're planning, like VFR day flight? Is it required by an airworthiness directive? Or by the aircraft's own equipment list or kinds of operations equipment list, KOEL, found in its flight manual? If the answer to any of those is yes, you generally cannot fly without getting a special flight permit from the FAA or fixing it. Now, some aircraft operate with a minimum equipment list, an MAL. That's a specific list approved by the FAA for that specific aircraft serial number, detailing exactly what can be broken and how to operate safely without it. If you don't have an MAL and the broken item is not required by those rules I mentioned, then you have two options. Remove it or deactivate it and placard it inoperative. And critically, a pilot, or sometimes a mechanic, has to determine that flying without that piece of equipment is actually safe. It's a judgment call backed by regulation.
Right, safety first. Okay, let's switch gears to the really cool part. How does this machine actually fly? Defying gravity. What are the basic forces at work?
It all comes down to balancing 4 fundamental forces: lift, weight, thrust, and drag. Lift is the upward force generated primarily by the wings that opposes weight, the force of gravity pulling everything down. Thrust is the forward force, usually from the engine and propeller, that overcomes drag, the resistance of the air pushing back against the airplane. In steady level flight, lift equals weight and thrust equals drag.
Okay, lift. That's the magic one for most people. How does it actually happen? Is it just the wing pushing air down? Or that Bernoulli thing?
It's a combination, but Bernoulli's principle is a major factor. The curved upper surface of a wing, the camber, forces the air flowing over the top to travel faster than the air flowing underneath. Faster moving air has lower pressure, so you get lower pressure on top of the wing, higher pressure underneath, and that pressure difference pushes the wing up. That's lift. The angle of attack, the angle between the wing chord line and the oncoming air, the relative wind, is also critical. Increasing the angle of attack increases lift, but only up to a point.
And drag, that's just air resistance slowing you down.
Basically, yes. But there are two main types, and they behave differently. There's parasitic drag. Think of it as friction. It's caused by the shape of the plane, the fuselage, landing gear, antennas, anything sticking out in the wind. It increases significantly as your airspeed increases. Faster you go, more parasitic drag. Then there's induced drag. This one is a bit trickier. It's actually a byproduct of generating lift. Those wingtip vortices, those swirling air off the wingtips, they cause induced drag. And here's the counterintuitive part. Induced drag is highest at low airspeeds when you need a high angle of attack to generate enough lift, like during takeoff or slow flight. It actually decreases as you speed up.
Interesting. So different types of drag dominate at different speeds. What about controlling the plane? What are the main parts that let you steer it around?
The primary flight controls. You've got ailerons, usually on the outer part of the wings. They move opposite each other to control roll, banking the aircraft left or right around the longitudinal axis. Then the elevator on the horizontal part of the tail. It controls pitch nose up or nose down around the lateral axis. And the rudder on the vertical part of the tail. It controls yaw, the nose moving left or right around the vertical axis. Helps coordinate turns and counteract those turning tendencies we'll talk about. You also have trim tabs, little adjustable surfaces on the main controls, especially the elevator. They help reduce the control pressure you need to hold, making it less tiring to fly. And flaps, usually on the inboard trailing edge of the wings. They increase lift and drag, allowing you to fly slower for takeoff and landing.
Okay, so ailerons for roll, elevator for pitch, rudder for yaw. Got it. What happens when you turn, and what are those quirks you mentioned, those turning tendencies?
Right, in a turn, you bank the aircraft using the ailerons. This tilts the lift vector. Part of the lift now pulls the aircraft horizontally into the turn. But because you're tilting the lift, the vertical component supporting the aircraft's weight decreases. So you also need to increase back pressure on the elevator slightly, increasing the total lift to maintain altitude. This increased lift requirement in a turn increases the load factor, which we feel is G-force. And importantly, it increases the stall speed. The airplane will stall at a higher airspeed in a banked turn than in level flight. Now those left turning tendencies. They're most noticeable in single-engine propeller planes, especially at high power and low airspeed, like during a climb. There are four main ones. Cork. The engine spins the prop clockwise, so physics tries to rotate the airplane counterclockwise or left. Gyroscopic precession. Remember, the propeller is a big spinning gyroscope. When you pitch the nose up, like on takeoff, the force acts 90 degrees ahead in the direction of rotation, causing a yaw to the left. Spiraling slipstream. The prop wash spirals back around the fuselage and hits the left side of the tail, pushing the tail right and the nose left. And P-factor, or asymmetric propeller loading. At high angles of attack, the downward-moving propeller blade on the right side takes a bigger bite of air than the upward-moving blade on the left, creating more thrust on the right side, yawing the nose left. Pilots constantly use right rudder to counteract these.
Wow, okay. Lots going on just to keep it flying straight. And the word stall keeps coming up. Can we clarify that? It's not the engine quitting, right?
Absolutely crucial distinction. A stall has nothing to do with the engine. It's an aerodynamic event. It happens when the wing exceeds its critical angle of attack. At that point, the airflow separates from the upper surface of the wing, lift decreases dramatically, and drag increases significantly. The wing just isn't flying efficiently anymore. It can happen at any airspeed, any attitude, if you pull the nose up too much or load the wing too heavily, like in a steep turn. We practice recognizing and recovering from different types of stalls. Power-off stalls like on approach, power-on stalls like on departure, and accelerated stalls which happen at higher speeds due to increased G-loading. Recovery always involves reducing the angle of attack. And related to control is stability, how the aircraft naturally wants to return to straight and level flight after a disturbance. There's static stability, its initial tendency, and dynamic stability, how it behaves over time, whether it dampens oscillations or they get worse. Aircraft are designed to be inherently stable, which makes the pilot's job easier.
Okay, so we understand the pilot, the plane, how it flies. But where does it fly? The sky looks empty, but you mentioned it's organized. Tell us about the National Airspace System.
Right, it's far from empty, especially near cities. It's divided into different classes of airspace, mainly A, B, C, D, E, and G. Each has different rules for visibility, cloud clearance, pilot certification, and equipment. Class A is high-altitude airspace, 18,000 feet MSL up to 60,000 feet. It's IFR-only instrument flight rules. You need an instrument rating and be on an IFR flight plan. Class B, or Bravo, surrounds the nation's busiest airports. Think major hubs like O'Hare, LAX, Atlanta. It often looks like an upside-down wedding cake on charts extending up quite high. To enter Class B, you need specific clearance from air traffic control. They have to explicitly say, cleared into the Class Bravo airspace. You also need certain equipment, like a transponder with Mode C altitude reporting and ADS-B out.
ADS-B, what's that?
Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast. It broadcasts your aircraft's position, altitude, and velocity to ATC and other aircraft. Enhances situational awareness. It's required in most controlled airspace now, including inside that Mode C veil, a 30 nautical mile ring around Class B airports, from the surface up to 10,000 feet. Then you have Class C, Charlie, around airports with a control tower and radar approach control. Class D, Delta, around smaller towered airports. Class E, Echo, which is most other controlled airspace. And Class G, Gulf, which is uncontrolled airspace, typically near the ground in remote areas. Each has its own set of rules.
And are there places you just shouldn't fly or need to be extra careful?
Definitely. That falls under special use airspace. Prohibited areas are no-fly zones, period. Think Camp David or Washington, D.C. Restricted areas have, well, restrictions, often due to hazardous activities like bombing ranges. You can fly through if it's cold, inactive, or with permission from the controlling agency. Military operations areas, MOAs, are areas where military training happens. High-speed maneuvers, aerobatics. VFR pilots can fly through, but you need to be extremely cautious and vigilant. It's best to check if it's active and maybe fly around if it is. There are also warning areas, similar to restricted but over water, alert areas, high volume of training flights, and national security areas, flight requested to be avoided. Knowing where these are is vital pre-flight planning.
Speaking of pre-flight, how does a pilot figure all this out? Weather, airspace, airport conditions. Seems like a lot to check before every single flight.
It is, and it's mandatory. Regulation 91.103 says before any flight, the pilot must become familiar with all available information concerning that flight. We often use the acronym NW Craft to remember the key items. N for NOTAM's notices to airmen. These cover temporary hazards, runway closures, equipment outages, things not on the charts. W for weather reports and forecasts. Current conditions, forecasts for the route, winds aloft. K for known ATC delays. R for runway lengths at airports of intended use. Can your plane safely take off and land there? A for alternatives available if the flight cannot be completed as planned. Where will you go if the weather turns bad? F for fuel requirements. Enough for the flight plus reserves. And T for takeoff and landing performance data. Calculate if you can clear obstacles, stop in time, given the conditions. It's a comprehensive check. You typically get a weather briefing from flight service or use approved online resources. A standard briefing covers everything for a planned flight. Abbreviated is for updates. Outlook is for planning well in advance. And you can get in-flight briefings via radio if needed.
Okay, NW Craft. That covers the planning. Those weather reports, though. METARs, TAFs. They look like code.
They do. But once you learn the format, they're incredibly efficient. A METAR is an aviation routine weather report current conditions at an airport, usually updated hourly. Gives you wind, visibility, weather phenomena like rain or mist, sky condition, clouds, temperature, dew point, altimeter setting. A TAF is a terminal aerodrome forecast. It's a prediction for the weather at that airport for the next 24 or 30 hours. Helps you plan arrivals. Reading them quickly and accurately is a fundamental skill.
Makes sense. Now, beyond the plane and the sky, there's the pilot's own body. What physiological stuff do pilots need to worry about?
Aeromedical factors are critical. Your body isn't designed to function optimally at high altitudes or under certain flight conditions. Hypoxia is a big one, lack of sufficient oxygen. It can impair judgment, vision, coordination, often subtly at first. Different types exist depending on the cause. Hyperventilation, breathing too rapidly, blowing off too much CO2 can cause dizziness, tingling, similar symptoms to hypoxia sometimes, which can be confusing. Often stress-induced. Carbon monoxide poisoning is insidious. Odorless, colorless gas from engine exhaust leaks. It prevents blood from carrying oxygen. Headache, drowsiness, blurred vision. Very dangerous. Need to shut off cabin heat, open vents, descend if suspected. Pilots also need to be aware of spatial disorientation and illusions. When you can't see the ground or horizon clearly, like in clouds or at night over dark areas, your inner ear and senses can lie to you.
You might feel like you're turning when you're not, the leans, or feel like you're pitching up when you're actually accelerating, subatogravic illusion. Or the graveyard spiral, losing altitude in a turn, you pull back, tightening the spiral without realizing it. The absolute key to overcoming these illusions is rigorous instrument training and trusting your instruments above all else. Fly the gauges, not your feelings.
Trust the instruments. Good advice. Okay, last area. Basic rules of the sky. How do pilots avoid hitting each other? Right away.
See and avoid is the fundamental principle for VFR flight. But there are specific right-of-way rules, much like driving. An aircraft in distress always has the right-of-way over everyone. When aircraft are converging at roughly the same altitude, the aircraft on the other's right has the right-of-way, so yield to traffic on your right. If approaching head-on, both aircraft alters course to the right. If overtaking another aircraft, the faster aircraft must alter course to the right and pass well clear. The aircraft being overtaken has the right-of-way. For landing, aircraft on final approach or at a lower altitude generally have priority. But you shouldn't abuse that rule to cut someone off. Common sense and courtesy apply. And finally, regulations about alcohol and drugs are strict. Less than 0.04% blood alcohol content, and no flying within 8 hours of consuming alcohol, the 8 hours bottle to throttle rule, and absolutely no flying under the influence of any drug that affects faculties. Safety is paramount.
Wow. Okay, we have really covered a huge amount of ground, or sky, I should say. From the hours, the solo flights, the endorsements, the aircraft checks, the forces of flight, navigating airspace, weather, even your own body. This deep dive really paints a picture. Becoming a private pilot isn't just a weekend hobby, it's a serious commitment involving a lot of knowledge, skill, and discipline.
It really is. And what strikes me is how interconnected it all is. Everything is designed around safety, procedures, and understanding the environment you're operating in, which, raises a broader point, doesn't it? This kind of knowledge, this structured approach, it's valuable when you understand it and apply it critically, especially today with so much information coming at us.
Exactly. That's a great point to end on. So, as you think about everything we've discussed today, here's something to consider. How could applying some of these aviation principles, that intense pre-flight planning, the objective risk assessment, trusting reliable data like instruments over misleading feelings, following rules for collective safety, how could that change how you approach challenges in your own life? A new project, a tough decision, even just learning something new, something to think about.